Most think peace is passive, that war is inevitable, or that somebody else will handle it. We don't. Welcome to the Department of Peace. Now, today's episode is a little bit different than most of our episodes. Today, myself and Jeremy sat down to recap and review our series, How to Survive a Dictator. We also took a look at the places in the world that are dealing with the most wars and genocides and ethnic cleansings. Places like Sudan, Palestine, Gaza, and places like Ukraine. And at the very end of this conversation, we talk about how we all need to find inner peace in order for us to create outer peace. Let's get into it. Jeremy, welcome back to the Department of Peace.
Thanks.
I got to do it this time.
Yeah.
You get to do it for all the other episodes.
It's fun being in the other chair.
All right, everybody. Today is going to be a little bit different today. We're going to do a quick review of what some of the work that you're doing in the world, some of the work that other global peacemaking coalitions are doing in the world. We're going to do a brief recap of where things have been, where they currently are, because I think a lot of our listeners want to know, boots on the ground, people in the trenches, what is actually happening. Don't just give us the beautiful little, slick B-roll sticky statements on CNN or Fox News or MSNBC. Let us know from the people who are actually there doing the work. So we're going to go ahead and dig right in. And our first place we're going to talk about is where you and I are at today, which is Iraq. So could you give us just a brief recap of what this season has been for this country, what we're coming out of, where you see us walking into?
Yeah, so you yourself come to Iraq at a time of, what I think we would all call relative peace. Lots to be happy about here, lots to be optimistic about here, especially in the big cities. Mm-hmm. Probably I could say that about nearly every big city in Iraq. But just outside the big cities, there are still very, very significant threats. ISIS is still here. Any claim to have truly defeated ISIS, I think, is pretty foolish and bombastic. You don't bomb ideas out of existence, and ISIS is really nothing but an idea that from time to time manages to control land.
Right.
The idea is still strong and still, I think, very much a threat to peace and people everywhere, but certainly here in these lands across, let's just broadly say, like the Middle East and North Africa. Lots of development across Iraq today. Lots of different initiatives. Investment is being made. I would even say that some foreign investment has returned. Any country's ability to attract foreign investment is a really important part of peace, I would say. It is hard. There are probably very few countries who now in this world today that we have can live isolated, disconnected from the rest of the world. And so if you have to be connected to the rest of the world, then you want to be connected to the world in a way that's a little more interdependent and mutual. You don't want to be connected to the world where you are a strict consumer and everyone else has all the means of production and control and can essentially cut you off at any time. So Iraq obviously has some things that it can give to the world, namely oil, and has also been able to attract foreign investment, not only in the oil and energy sector, but we've got some name brand hotels here and some name brand food chains and things like that are coming, grocery stores that are kind of coming in from France and the US and some other places. So I think the ability to attract foreign investment 10, 15 years after the official end of the American invasion and occupation, roughly 10 years after the height of the ISIS thing, it's a good harbinger it's a good bellwether kind of a things to come. But the ISIS threat is not something that I think we can afford to take our eye off of. At least as people who live here, we have to know that that's still very much in our backyard, and those ideas they're really not only out in the hinterlands. That's where they gather, but they're among us. There are still people very much here in the city among us who espouse those ideas and would love to see a rise of ISIS again, the caliphate. And the reason I think that matters is because it helps inform how I think about relationship with my neighbors, how we as a team think about relationship with our neighbors. Like, this world is longing for engagement, and isolationism, isolating others, isolating bad ideas is not, in my opinion, the best way to peace. If we were to adopt a complete disengagement strategy and we just shun every idea we don't like and every person that espouses those ideas and send them into the hinterlands, that's where they organize and metastasize and then come back into the cities and cause maximum harm. So I think knowing how to engage your neighbors when they espouse ideas that are different than you and maybe even dangerous to you is a really important part of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to teach in the world.
To kind of give our listeners some, maybe more of the nitty gritty here, when you say that ISIS is at your back door, can you actually, what do you mean literally? Are we talking there's still a presence in the outskirts of the cities here? So when you travel around inside of the country, is that a thing that you have to think about? Are we talking about border? Is Iraq as a country safe and then we have to worry about our neighbors? Or is there an actual real presence and a threat here?
No, when I say here, I mean Iraq. On any one of my neighborhood streets, there absolutely could be ISIS supporters. Now, we're not talking about a significant number of people. And I don't think really any of us live in fear of our neighbors like that. But they exist. And it's, I think, largely we still live in a society here in Iraq where it's important to have congenial relationship with your neighbors, to know your neighbors, to be able to rely on your neighbors for, what we used to say in America, milk and sugar and that kind of stuff. I don't feel like that's not the America I go home to anymore. I don't feel like I go home to an America where we mostly know our neighbors, where the people I'm around mostly seem to know their neighbors. I hope that's still true in some places, but it's true here. The reason some of this stuff still exists in the deserts or the mountains or kind of the out there spaces that aren't the big cities, there's less security presence overall. There's less overall surveillance and checkpoints and militarized kind of spaces that we actually do have in the cities here. And I'm not a fan of those, but the net effect is that they actually do manage to keep some things at bay. And then, to the degree that some of this is fueled by poverty and disaffection with systems and governments, those rural spaces or desert spaces are cut off from government services and are unreached by some of the things that might otherwise improve their life and even give them just alternative options to engage in other than some of this ideological warfare kind of stuff. So they're still here. They still probably have their dreams and aspirations of reclaiming the next town over. And, the scary thing about how it all went down last time is cities just bowed before them. Like cities fell in succession. Once you commit the insanely atrocious acts that they committed in 2014, no one wants to really try their hand to see if they're going to be the next group to be beheaded.
Right.
So people just fled. Governments fled. Militaries fled before them. And, a group of a couple thousand guys ended up overrunning a third of the country. So I think there's always reason to stay vigilant.
Mm-hmm.
And there's different kind of definitions of vigilance or methods of vigilance, but I think a lot of us are still always willing to stay vigilant, and no one here is really like, oh, that's totally a thing of the past, nothing to worry about, because it only took a few thousand people to do significant harm for years.
Crazy. Okay. Let's move to Syria. Once long-ruling dictator, now upended. And Syria is now in what I think the majority of the world would assume is a free iteration of Syria. Could you give us a brief look? Well, I'll also preface too that you do a lot of work. Humanite does a lot of work. There are people here, part of Humanite, part of the Department of Peace, who come from Syria and have fled here from Syria. So could you give us a little brief just synopsis of what is that currently looking like now, and where's Syria going?
Yeah, so Syria, a number of our teammates at Humanite are Syrian refugees, people who have had to flee that country under Bashar al-Assad, and I ended up meeting them in Iraq, which has become their new home, and so a couple of months ago from where we sit now, December 24, this long-running revolution actually found its way to some success, and success started compounding really quickly, like shockingly so, after literally 13 years of just kind of trudging along and significant setbacks, almost a stalemate, you could say, since 2016. And when the city of Aleppo fell, we say fell back into Assad's hands, almost an 8-year, more or less stalemate. There's been movements, but that was probably the last massive time when the rebel side, the revolutionary side, had held big meaningful ground. And anyway, so in the fall of 24, they just started having some wins. And
what happened? Like, was there a major moving point, or was it just the constant over and over push?
I'll be honest, it caught me so unawares that I didn't even, it was just so fast that I didn't even go back to really kind of analyze the military side, which I've often really enjoyed doing, and things often move slowly enough that I can keep up with both the military and the humanitarian and the political side of things. I took my eye off the ball of Syria for just a little bit to work on Gaza.
Right.
And I turned back, and Bashar al-Assad, the 20-year dictator who is the son of a previous 30-year dictator, is overthrown and had fled the country overnight. And the putative leader of Syria now is the guy that we knew for years as basically an Al-Qaeda leader, an ISIS affiliate. And so that is interesting.
Yeah.
It's challenging. It's mind stretching for a lot of us. And I don't think Syrians are united on this. I don't think the world is certainly not united.
Sure.
And yet he's not Assad. And so we're back in this cycle of what does it mean to do engagement? I'm sure some people are thinking, what does it do? What does it mean to be, exploitative and manipulative in this time? Anytime a new weak leader comes in or a new leader comes in, there are inherent weaknesses.
Yeah.
There are things that they don't know. I mean, the difference in being a warlord and being a president are
Night and day.
like
Yeah.
innumerable.
Yeah.
And so one day you're the warlord of Idlib, you know, a small little province. The next you're the president of Syria or the face and leader of a country. Like it's the dog who caught the car.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
this group that had built so much of its reputation on Islamist, jihadist, Al-Qaeda, ISIS type. Not that all of those are exactly the same thing, but they're broadly in the same universe as one another. Now we're all being asked to believe that the leopard can change his spots and is going to be a real democracy guy.
Yeah.
Now, look, if anyone believes that people can change, that's like my whole thing.
Yeah.
But it does beggar the imagination, you know, to kind of go, well, okay, well then which one was the lie, or which one was the act, or which one was the marriage of convenience? You know, was it a marriage of convenience to go with the Islamist kind of Al-Qaeda modality because that allowed you to win people over to your side who were going to be like the most loyal, diehard, extreme for you, but that was always an act for you? Or was that the real and this is the act for you because now you want to sit in the chair and have meetings with global leaders, and or are they both acts? And if so, then who are you really? Do you know who you are after this many years of, you know, being underground and
Right.
and leading revolutionaries? So it's an interesting time. Our team will tell you that Damascus, the capital city, is getting like 1 hour of electricity a day. Like the ability to literally keep the lights on is just like completely fallen by the wayside.
I feel like we just need to let that sink in for a second.
1 hour.
1 hour a day. We were briefly talking about this the other day and just trying to think through like how much you would have to get done in that 1 hour. And it's the entire city trying to do that in that 1 hour.
Yeah. It might rotate a little bit. You might at least it'll typically rotate. You know, you don't literally turn the whole city on and the whole city off.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I've lived it. It's terrible.
Yeah.
You know, like literally to not be able to keep food in your fridge because what's the point?
Yeah.
To feel like you got to get all the washing done in an hour, or you know, the kids want to watch YouTube, and you know, it's just like to cram it all in an hour and then go back to pre-electricity days. So you got that happening in the majority of the country right now, but maybe most shockingly for some, your capital city, when your capital is that bad off, then you can only assume that everyone else is doing worse. But that's not true right now. What is maybe shockingly, alarmingly true. So let me roll back a number of years. As Assad, the dictator, the former guy, waged this war against his own people, he drove them in waves further and further north, often.
Okay.
And those northward fleeing populations ended up getting corralled into the northwestern corner of the country in a province called Idlib. Now, we've worked there off and on for years. And Idlib became this like everyone trapped in a corner. Now, there was a little bit of access point between Idlib and Turkey, and that became a bit of a political problem for a number of people involved. It strained Syria-Turkish relations. but aid organizations in a troubled spot if you passed into Syria via Turkey into Idlib, because that was technically outside of the control of the Syrian Arab Republic. And so it became a bit of like, if you work here, then you can't work here kind of situation, because they were pitted against each other. So this little enclave of Idlib becomes basically the rebel hideout. And those who just want to survive, many of whom are fighters, many of whom had their boys abducted and disappeared or tortured. Probably people of all different ideologies and thinking, but it definitely started to be branded as an Al-Qaeda, ISIS, extremist sort of enclave, which had some truth to it and was also not a fair characterization of everyone there.
Yeah.
But you couldn't get aid in a lot of cases. The Syrian regime would intercept medical shipments or food shipments or anything that aid organizations like ours might try to bring in. It was very common for those to be intercepted. And so it was a constant effort to try and squeeze them out and choke them off in many ways. So what they ended up doing over time is building their own survival networks and trade networks into Turkey. And ended up developing a society for themselves that lived somewhat independent of the Syrian Arab Republic of Damascus.
Oh, interesting.
And that was essentially home base for all these fighters who ended up overthrowing the capital. So now what you have is you have a capital in a country that is largely not functioning. And you have an enclave of rebel leaders, former rebel leaders, whatever, a rebel population that learned how to survive. And we literally got invited there last week to help do a major development project on a hospital.
Amazing.
So like the entire tables have turned, where the historic capital, one of the oldest, most famous cities in the world, is barely functioning. And this place that, we were talking about just years ago, we were talking about the Gazification of Idlib, the Gazification of Syria, meaning this little plot of land has the potential to be completely cut off from the world and choked out and placed in a very similar kind of situation that we see Gaza in right now. And that ended up not happening.
Okay, let's move to Gaza. Probably out of all the places we're talking about today, the one that is in the news the most, which usually means you're not getting all the information, or maybe the most correct information on it. And so I know you and the team here does a lot of work in Gaza. Can you give us a brief just synopsis? Where are we today? And now with the U.S., I guess we can say somewhat involved with the future of Gaza. Where are you with the U.S. coming to quote unquote help Gaza? What is the feelings behind that? Where is Gaza going, and how are you feeling about that?
Yeah, well, for obvious reasons, we couldn't get our Gaza director here to have this conversation today, but. So I'll do my best to represent, him and the team's point of view there. Gaza, probably the most in the news and therefore the most misunderstood, perhaps, of all global issues today, global affairs. We have been in America raised on a lie. There's just no other way to say it. And I think what has happened over the last year and a half since October 7th is that the mask on that lie has slipped really significantly, and for many people has come off altogether. The lie goes something like this. Israel was created in a land with no people for a people with no land. And the amount of money and time and effort that has been put behind that lie is nothing short of the same exact propaganda playbook that we have seen our friends over the course of our How to Survive a Dictator series, for example, talk about growing up under Hafez al-Assad, a Bashar al-Assad, a Saddam Hussein. It is a well-worn playbook to indoctrinate a nation, but in this case, a couple of nations, a number of nations, the world, on a story that is not only not true, but is fundamentally genocidal in its nature.
Yeah.
So to be clear and to put a very fine point on it, the land that we now know as Israel in the UN had a people. It was not a land with no people. It was a land with people called Palestinians. And those Palestinians were Jewish, and those Palestinians were Christian, and those Palestinians were Muslim. And the Zionist project that had existed for decades by that point helped to create this myth and perpetuate this myth in the wake of World War II and the Holocaust, and ended up repeating the same traumas, the same evils that many of those Jews themselves were trying to escape and had just lived through. And so when we come to October 7th, we many of us come at it with drastically different understandings of what is even happening. If you accept and live under the story that that was a land with no people, created, perhaps even by God, for a people that had no land, then October 7th can only be, with no nuance to it, can only be the horrific massacre of innocent Jewish people who did nothing wrong except live their lives in the land that God gave them. And the people who perpetrated those murders, that terrorism, those crimes, those atrocities, can be nothing but barbarous monsters who, probably by virtue of their religion and or their ethnicity, are just hell-bent on being this way. And if that's true, then really we have no choice but to exterminate those animals that live on our doorstep and pose such a constant threat to us. And all the good and free world should support that effort. If, however, you live on the other side of that story and you have memory of living in that land, you know you were there. You know your parents were there before the creation of this state that we now call Israel. You still have the keys to that house that you and your people were forcibly driven out from. And some of whom were ultimately locked into this concentration camp called Gaza. And it matters what we call things.
Yeah.
One of the things you often hear it called is an open-air prison. Well, the problem with calling it a prison is it it reifies the idea that those people did something wrong, and they deserve to be locked in there.
Right.
Why do we use concentration camps to talk about Jews in Europe, but we put Palestinians in open air prisons?
Yeah.
There's a reason for this rhetoric. So if you live on the side that knows you were corralled into a concentration camp and you have tried every which way for 75 years to get out, then the still heinous murders of October 7th just take on a different, they're just different.
Yeah.
Certainly I have friends on many sides who would justify. I have friends who would condemn. But the actual date of October 7th notwithstanding, everything that has happened since then is genocide. And it has been extremely it's been an extremely enlightening time, I think, for a lot of Americans.
Yeah.
There's probably no single event or series of events in my lifetime that has caused so many people to wake up to the lie that we were raised on.
So now Gaza and Trump are in the news together quite a bit. Trump holds this press conference with, I believe it was the leader of Israel. He's sitting there right next to him. It says that the U.S. is going to own Gaza. And then the one piece of history with this is that Trump then shares this video of the AI redevelopment of Gaza with a gold statue of Trump right in the smack.
Trump Gaza.
Trump Gaza. Yeah.
It's a branded Gaza.
It has to be, right? Because it's Trump. What have you heard not from Americans about their perspective on that? Have you heard from anyone in the area of Gaza or anyone here, their perspective on maybe not so much Trump, but the U.S. coming in to turn Gaza into this resort?
If Iraq was a quagmire, that Trump has been extremely critical of, and that the U.S. was dragged into by its nose. I mean, we made our own choices. We have our own responsibility, but
Sure.
largely informed by Bibi Netanyahu, the same man in charge of Israel today. We should absolutely expect a Trump Gaza, a U.S. owning of Gaza. I think what we should call it is an American attempted colonization of Gaza to be worse than Iraq or on par with Iraq. The reason I can say worse, Palestinians are so doggedly committed to their land. Like there is a different kind of story and history that they have lived. I don't know a lot of Iraqis that ever really felt like they were going to lose their whole country in that way, because at least the veneer that the U.S. put on in Iraq was that we're bringing you democracy. And pretty quickly we installed, an Iraqi leader, and Even if it was a puppet or a proxy or whatever, like we were still going through most of the trappings of democracy. That's not would have to happen in Gaza. What would have to happen in Gaza is a fight very, very similar to what Israel just tried to do, but with significantly more ground troops. You'd have to the amount of occupation and ethnic cleansing that you would have to do on the face of it to be able to develop a Riviera such as their, an owned Riviera. It did used to be its own Palestinian Riviera. We don't need to create something that they already created it. But if we want to own it, you're talking about a troop deployment and an ethnic cleansing on the level that really didn't happen in Iraq, because Palestinians aren't leaving.
Do you see that happening?
No.
Why not?
I hope I'm right.
Yeah.
But no. I think okay, let me clarify. Will Trump let Israel do it? Maybe. Will Trump commit American troops to go do it? I'm far less inclined to think that.
Okay.
I think Trump has a very keen sense of ratings. And I think he knows that is not a winning ratings. He's not an ideologue.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know that he cares about this lie or this myth or this story or this mythos. I think he can be certainly captured by the Israel lobby, but it's not his conviction. It's not his ideology. So I think he'd be more inclined to let Israel take another stab at it, but I don't see him committing American troops so that we can properly own it. And if I recall, he did actually walk back some of that statement a little bit. Now that said, Israel has done, I think there's two things that have happened in the last year and a half. One, they have done significantly more damage than I think I at least thought they would be allowed to get away with. I mean, we responded in Gaza we did some response in Gaza before fully really committing ourselves there in 21, which was quite a bit of destruction. I watched on without getting really involved in 2014, which is a lot of destruction. This stuff happens every few years on a cycle, but this was unlike anything that had ever happened before.
Right.
So Israel did a lot. They had a leash to do a lot, but by all accounts, they did not defeat Hamas. They only spurred recruitment. Yeah. They killed some Hamas fighters. I'm sure they would say they killed a lot more than, the Ministry of Health in Gaza would say. But they don't seem to account for how many future revolutionaries they've created by killing their dads. And I mean, you and I sat with a Syrian rebel freedom fighter during our How to Survive a Dictator series. And his inciting incident, he's at a protest carrying flowers, protesting the government, just an innocent kid, 15 years old. He's not trying to hurt anybody, doesn't have rocks in his pockets, no weapons. And he's walking home and he gets kidnapped by the regime, disappeared. No one knows where he is for 8 days. He's tortured. And that's his inciting incident to go join the Free Syrian Army and actually pick up arms and fight against his government.
Yeah. As a kid. Still as a kid.
Yeah. This is what happens. Yeah. And so it's what's happening in Gaza today. And so for however many they killed, I got to imagine they created, and not because Palestinians are violent, not because not because of Islam, not because of, it's a diverse community. We've got Christians and Muslims on our team. people want to be free.
How will history books talk about this period of time? Actually, let me roll that back. How will history books talk about Gaza as a whole?
That's a sad and scary question. Well, I mean, ultimately, it depends on who writes the history. And, of course, that's how it always is.
Yeah.
But if you look at what's going to happen is there's going to be two histories of Gaza. And you can basically look at it, all you have to do is look at a UN vote. You can look at how the UN votes when a ceasefire resolution or a humanitarian aid or a censorship of Israel or a condemnation of Israel vote comes up. Look at how the 190-some countries vote. You're going to find 3 or 4 countries on the no side. You're going to find 185 plus countries on the yes side. Those are your two histories of Gaza.
Yeah.
There's going to be an official U.S., Israel, maybe England, Australia, Canada, kind of depends on the thing. But there's going to be like that so-called Western or Northern kind of narrative. And then there's going to be the entire population of the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
That have two different stories of Gaza. So whether Gaza ends up being fully occupied, whether it exists or not, whether the Palestinians are razed absolutely to the ground or whether they persist, I do think there's enough of the world now that really does see what's happening, that our collective global history will not allow this story will not allow the lie to persist.
Okay, let's move on to Ukraine. It's been in the news and the central media for several years now. You've been doing work there for several years now. Trump is back in office. He's meeting with Zelensky. He's meeting with Putin. Deals are thrown around, etc. I feel like, personally, there's the media around Ukraine right now is a mixed bag. It really feels like wherever you're listening in, Trump calls Zelensky a dictator. He pulls it back, says he doesn't remember saying it. You listen to other outlets. Putin is trying to help Ukraine. What is actually happening right now? And what is not only Ukraine, but the Russian-Ukraine war? Where are we at in that? What are things looking like?
Yeah, this one is, nearly as complex as talking about the land between the river and the sea that we just did. How to lay the groundwork on this. So, Trump campaigns in his second presidency run that he'll end the war in 24 hours. And some people really believe that. Some people believe it, but with goodness, what's he going to do? What concessions is he going to make? Like, how in is he still with Putin that he could end the war in a day? It has not played out that way, which may honestly be for the good of everyone. Because the concessions that many people feared might have had to have happened to end it in a day, and the expense that might have come at for the people of Ukraine, the nation of Ukraine, there were a lot of alarm bells going off. Now, Trump is a master of one-liners and rhetoric and stuff like that, so maybe that's all it was. The actual negotiations, have proven, I'll clarify that statement in a minute, have proven to be more complicated than a 24-hour victory.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure, as I sit here today, I don't think that anything called negotiations has even happened. And that's one thing that has been like kind of maybe lost in some of the media media coverage. And what I mean by that is these are arguably what we're going through right now, negotiations about negotiations.
Yeah. Yeah.
And is that a difference without a meaning? You know, I don't know. Probably depends on where you sit. If you are Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, you know, he's been saying, how can you have negotiations without the aggrieved party sitting at the table? Sounds reasonable. Makes sense. The U.S. response has been, these aren't negotiations. You're not being locked out. You're not being not invited. We're trying to get a temperature. We're trying to get a read here so that we can know what's even possible. Because the previous administration, Biden's government, chose a complete disengagement, isolationist kind of policy vis-a-vis Russia. So we don't have really active engagement with Russia. We have to re-engage. So that's going to take some overture.
Yeah.
Obviously, engagement with Russia is in and of itself a bit of a political football, depending on your point of view and where you come from. Okay. Full disclosure, we worked with the Zelensky family. And so that's it's just something I feel like needs to be said for whatever else I say. Like when you have those kinds of relationships in your life, in your history, we've taken U.S. government money in the past. I guess maybe we're still technically on a U.S. government contract. We're not exactly sure. When you have those things in your life, those are disclosures that I just think are important.
Yeah.
And people will read into them whatever they want, whether it's a too harsh a critique or too soft a critique or whatever. But I feel the need to. These are the disclosures that we don't often get from our corporate media.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's worth disclosing. The thing that I think a lot of Americans miss about this story is there's two bits. One, the U.S. played an extremely provocative role in starting this war. And unless you're like really following along, you probably don't know that. Coming out of the Cold War era, we made, as a country, a promise to Russia that we would not let NATO encroach 1 inch closer to Russia from the line and the terms that were set at that time. And then there's been a lot of gymnastics and stuff that, you know, people saying, oh, we never said that, or it didn't mean what we said it meant, or whatever. But that is fundamentally this NATO coalition that was set up to be a bulwark against Russia. For the sake of peace, we promised that basically NATO had, you know, largely served its purpose, and the USSR has fallen, and we're not going to come closer to you. We're not going to move our troops in. We're not going to annex or admit new members. And we have been repeatedly, the U.S. being the driving force of NATO, but NATO has repeatedly been bringing in more and more and more members that have essentially encroached further and further and further toward Russia, breaking what was seen as a very, very key promise, the linchpin of peace back in the 90s. The big moments that Putin's always criticized for, rightly criticized for, his illegal invasions of Georgia, his illegal invasion of Ukraine and annexation of the Crimean Peninsula, and then later his illegal invasion and annexation of the Donbass, eastern Ukraine. they all three come on the heels of NATO membership moves. So Bush makes a move to get Georgia into NATO. Putin starts a war because one of the tenets of NATO membership is that you can't have a border dispute going on. So if you're at war, you can't join NATO. So it's a tactic to keep yet another bordering state with Russia joining NATO. Same in 2014 when there's talk of Ukraine joining NATO, and then again in 2021 as Biden is really entertaining and pushing for NATO membership with Ukraine. Now, look, to be clear, it's still illegal. It's still wrong, and it still has caused massive, massive death and destruction and what some researchers at Yale have called genocide. So giving historical context is not meant, in my view, to be whitewashing or anything at all. It's context. Yeah. I believe the U.S. knows what it's doing. I don't believe the U.S. is just clumsily fumbling toward genocide or clumsily fumbling toward, a disaster in Ukraine and oops, we're sorry. I think the U.S. knows what it's doing, and that's why the context is important for me, not to justify Putin, but to criticize the U.S. In both scenarios, the Ukrainian people, my friends, our partners, are the people who get caught in the middle.
Yep.
But I think when you come from that Cold War mentality, when your brain is fixed on that programming like Biden's was, you understand how war can drag you out of a recession. Yeah. Let's not forget where we were when Biden entered office and what he was meant to solve.
Yep.
He was meant to bring us out of these recessionary, high inflation kind of environments post-COVID. And the recipe is war. So him and Boris Johnson got together and stoked the fires of war. Putin invaded. He took the bait. He did something illegal that we knew and wanted him to do because there was already a blueprint in 2014 and 2008 that he would do it. And we are using Ukraine and a relatively new president in Ukraine for our own ends, to get us and the UK out of our high inflationary, recessionary kind of situation that we're in. That's the context that I think we often miss. Yeah. We are, at our core, being led as a country by the military-industrial complex. Yeah. And so even after, and I think that maybe the greatest evidence for this is that after Putin invaded and him and Zelensky's teams came to the table, and I think it was probably April, maybe all the way into May, but I think April of 22, so about 2 months into the war, there was a peace plan on the table that, if you listen to most of the reporting, both teams had agreed to. There was a deal on the table, and Boris Johnson stepped in and scuttled the deal, and basically said, "Do not make peace with Putin. We'll give you whatever you need." And so we have kept using the people of Ukraine and using the men of Ukraine as grist in the mill of our own war mechanizations to lift the American people out of recession. Yeah. All the while valorizing them, hanging up their flags across D.C., hashtagging and all the kind of things that we do to villainize Putin and keep the cycle going. Yeah. They do deserve valor. They do deserve honor.
Mm.
But the intentions with which corporate media and their overlords do it, I think really matter.
So what do you see as the next steps with Ukraine, Russia, Greater Europe, America? What is the feeling that you have is going to be the next step that takes place?
I was really, as gambits go, I was really impressed with President Zelensky's statement at a recent conference. I believe he was asked something about Trump calling him a dictator, and he said, "If you need me to step down, I'll step down." Like I think I'm still the best person to try to lead these negotiations and get us out of this. But if you want me to step down, I'll step down. This is I am in this for Ukraine.
Yeah,
I'm in this for the people of Ukraine.
just give us peace. Yeah.
And I mean, last I heard, look, I haven't looked this up myself, but last I heard, he's, you can say he's slipping in the polls. That's probably true. Like any war that drags on, like it's hard to stay popular. But I think he still enjoys something like 60% popularity for a wartime president. So, if you're taking a litmus test of what do the people of Ukraine want, and my own conversations with friends and partners in Kyiv and across the land, it's a mixed bag. I mean, I think people are broadly obviously sick of feeling just terrorized all the time by Russia.
Yeah.
There was something like 267 drone strikes just a few days ago, and like a historic number that make everyone just feel completely terrified.
Yeah.
So I do think there's a dawning or a reckoning, or like, fine, if we have to make some concessions to Russia, then maybe we have to make some concessions to Russia. Like, we didn't start this, but if we're going to be losing American support, if our moment has passed, then okay. I mean, at the end of the day, we want peace. I mean, it's a bit of a cliche statement, but when you're living under daily airstrikes, I don't know, man. It's hard to say. Like, it's hard to say. We're fairly used to the Biden playbook, the Biden worldview. It has been like the normal American president, the normal American foreign policy move. Trump is, at least on the face of it, different than that. I think it's maybe yet to be seen whether beneath the surface he's really different than that. There's a sense that the House always wins. And if you think that the House is actually the military-industrial complex, then let's see what happens.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move to one that I think for a lot of people, they might be shocked it's on this list, which is Sudan. We hear a lot about places like Gaza, Ukraine, Syria even. But Sudan was very much not even in the news at all. And so, and I know you do some work there as well. Let's talk about Sudan, what's happening there, and maybe even just give a brief, quick 1 or 2 minute synopsis of why this place is even in this discussion. Because I wouldn't be shocked if a lot of people don't even know that something massive is happening there right now.
Yeah. Okay, a couple high level things. Number one, I'm no Sudan expert. I've been a couple of times. Friends I can get on the phone in a moment's notice to check in and know what's going on. But not an expert. And so do your own research. Follow up on anything I say. But I was invited into Sudan a number of years ago. Can't even remember necessarily what the first instigating kind of moment was. But ended up getting connected to some people at a very, very high level, like the highest. This is during the al-Bashir presidency dictatorship era of rule. I remember on one trip, I ended up sitting in, and I offer this as context. So I say I'm not an expert, but I want to offer that I'm not completely out of pocket, just kind of commenting from afar. In one trip, I ended up getting invited to this guy's house that we were meant to meet, and ended up being the mentor of Osama bin Laden.
Wow.
So bin Laden fled from, I don't know if this was his first stop from Saudi or if this was a stopover from Afghanistan, but ended up in Sudan after, I believe he led a major terror attack on a U.S. naval ship, if I remember right. Okay. And his Al-Qaeda banned this young group. Ended up in Sudan seeking refuge, and the Bashir government gave him refuge, which ultimately led to Bashir being labeled as a state sponsor of terror for giving him safe harbor. Bin Laden kind of comes into relationship with this Islamist government and this Islamist philosopher, thinker, leader. I think he married his daughter at one point, reportedly. And now I'm sitting in his home having tea, and this guy had been imprisoned. He'd been imprisoned by his very president that he used to be like partners with, and they had fallings out and reconciliations and whatever. So he was an interesting figure that was kind of my first among my early introductions to the country. Well, then over time, this revolutionary forces against Bashir started bubbling up, and I think it was 2019, the Bashir government was overthrown. And he was overthrown by a mixture of the military and the militia that he had supported out in the far Darfur kind of hinterland regions. If anyone knows Sudan, one of the things you may know about it is what was kind of known as the Darfur genocide back in, 2006, 7, 8, in those years. And the Janjaweed, the men who come on horses, were these like Arab militias that were accused of genocide against often the black African tribes out in those areas. And Bashir, the president, had kind of co-opted those militia and brought them further into his employ and control, and further enfranchised them with power and machinery and all the things that you need to kind of create your own forces around you to protect you in the capital. Well, they turned on him ultimately and kind of ostensibly sided with the people. And then we went into an era of kind of military rule, which was a tense kind of period where the Janjaweed militia, RSF side was having a portion of control, and the military had some control. My more recent trips after the toppling of Bashir, went in and met with military government leaders and the warlord militia leaders, the guys who had been really stand at like the top of the list of those who committed genocide in Darfur. And when you say we have work there, the work was to do anything we could to stave off a full-scale return to civil war. This was 22, something like that. Yeah, 23. We failed, as did apparently everyone else. And so those two sides did end up returning to or engaging in a full fracture of those governing lines and fought each other and have been fighting each other ever since. You've got, backers from the Gulf on one side. You've got Russia looting gold from mines controlled by these militias and trying to bypass sanctions and taking out just like tons of gold so that they can survive sanctions by looting Sudan. And then because you've got Russia operating in like proxy warfare on the side of the RSF, then you've got Ukraine sending in its operators and military and backing people vis-a-vis Russia, because I guess the thinking is we need to cut off Russia's gold supply, because the gold supply is how they're evading sanctions and how they're continuing to fund their war against us in our land. So now we're fighting wars abroad to help really support the war at home. And so Sudan's become this really messed up playground for bad actors across the board. For people who don't have the best intentions, I'll define it like this: for people who don't have the best intentions of the people of Sudan at heart. Genocide is returned to Sudan. Starvation has returned to Sudan. The violence and the indiscriminate nature of it has driven out, nearly every foreign body that, just can't, like, I don't fault anyone for leaving, like, but a lot of them are gone. Now we're not there as foreigners. So we're left with a handful of friends and partners and people that we once met with and hoped that we could, broker some kind of better way forward that never happened.
Why is media, and when I say media, I mean literally any media you look up, whether it's a progressive or more conservative news outlet, why is no one talking about Sudan? And is the answer maybe because Sudan doesn't have anything to offer to the rest of the world like some of these other places?
No, it's because they're black. And they're African. And you can be black in a number of places, but to be black African is like the double. I mean, clearly Sudan has gold, enough gold for Russia to be flying it out on cargo planes to fund a war. It's not that Sudan isn't also a typical mineral-rich target of foreign exploitation. It is. In fact, China's heavily involved in Sudan. Our media doesn't cover it because they're black. And at a time when you have white Ukrainians suffering who can be instrumentalized in our collective war effort to lift us out of recession and decrease inflation. And at a time when you have white Israelis who are suffering and can be instrumentalized to help drive billions and billions of dollars of war machinery and loans. But when you have more sympathetic options to your average American mind, there's no need. There's no appetite. There's only so much suffering that we can take on anyway. And you had far better candidates over the course of this period of time in Ukrainians and Israelis than Sudanese people were ever going to present to the average American mind.
Okay, last place we're going to talk about. Let's talk about the United States to wrap this up. I'm not going to give you any prompts. Nothing. I just want you to, after we've talked about all these places, some American presence in them, I'm just going to give you the word United States. I'm just going to let you riff for a little bit on that one.
Okay, well, a couple things. In light of and in view of some of the other places that we've talked about and what we've lived through in those places, or our friends, teammates, colleagues are living through or have lived through in those places, I think it's important to note that maybe some of the critique or rhetoric around the United States right now is very much at risk of being hyperbolic.
Mm-hmm.
To call Trump a dictator in light of
Mm-hmm.
this series we just did, How to Survive a Dictator, the stories that we're hearing from our friends on this show, that is not true
Mm-hmm.
right now.
Mm-hmm.
President Trump was elected by a very frustrated population to be the 47th president, and he is.
Yeah.
He's not a dictator.
Yep.
And it's important that we not throw important words that have important meaning and usage around too willy-nilly, because when we need them, they might not be there for us anymore. That said, and this is the nuance that a lot of us aren't good at.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a nuance that I'm going to say here that needs to be picked up on. It doesn't mean we're not headed to a dictatorship.
Mm-hmm.
Like, two things can be true at once.
Yeah.
And so it is a nuanced difference to say, I am afraid that we are headed to dictatorship. I have my concerns, or we have our collective concerns,
Mm-hmm.
and we want to push back on what seem to be dictatorial proclivities or tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's hyperbolic. Yeah. I think those are the good faith concerns of people who should not necessarily be defined as haters
Mm-hmm.
or anything. Like, that's people.
Yeah.
And people should be allowed to have their fears and questions and pushback.
Yeah.
But that is very different than saying dictator Trump.
Yeah.
And if we are going to, if you think that we're going to need that word one day, then be very careful using it too soon.
Yeah.
Because if you here's why. If we call Trump a dictator today, and we wake up tomorrow and our world just goes on and it's just fine.
Mm-hmm.
And we wake up a year from now and it goes on and it's just fine. And the sky never falls and the bottom never falls out and the markets never crash and maybe egg prices even come down. Then what is going to happen if you spent 4 years calling
Right.
an otherwise constitutional president?
Mm-hmm.
Now we come to election. Now Congress starts talking about ramming through a new law that would allow him to run for a third term.
Mm-hmm.
Or he I don't know what the scenario would be. But two totally different candidates run and he just chooses to never vacate the office, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Well, if you've spent 4 years just desensitized, we've talked at other times about the desensitization of certain things. If we numb each other out on the word dictator too soon, then the very neighbors that we're going to need to join arm in arm with are not going to be there for us because we alienated them too soon.
Yeah.
Because we couldn't be nuanced. Because we had to go for the jugular and the most extreme. Now, the other side of that is true as well.
Mm-hmm.
If you find yourself as a Trump supporter, for example, Elon supporter, Tesla owner, I don't know, whatever, Cybertruck aficionado, and you hear people in your pub or coffee shop or church or workplace throwing around words that really are getting your hackles up and you're really getting frustrated. You also have an obligation to be nuanced. We have these obligations to each other. It is not that one side needs to bend over backwards for the other side so that we don't offend each other. We have these obligations to each other in a society. And so if you hear the word dictator, well, be sure before you just write someone off that they're not actually saying the word dictatorial. That's a different word.
Good. It's a different word. Yeah.
If someone is saying that someone is exhibiting tendencies or moving in a direction, don't write them off as a hysterical libtard that is predicting the end of the world.
Right.
Because that's not a fair assessment of people, of our neighbors who have well-meaning concerns.
I mean, we've even heard from a few guests this week that how you look for signs. What are the signs you look for in a dictator? And then those same guests have said, I think it was Rowan, who even said, when Saddam becomes a dictator, we were already too late.
It's too late.
You've already bought into the system. You already trust the person. There's micro growth patterns towards dictatorship that you just don't recognize until you realize, oh, we are in a full-fledged dictatorship and there's nothing we can do now. So that's huge. Pay attention to the signs and call them out. And when other people do, actually listen. Don't take that in as, a trusted source. Do your own research, do your homework, your own homework, but don't write anything off.
I think we're far too trusting of this. This is like this used to be an American hallmark of sorts, I feel like, but some of us have just become way too trusting of our guy in government.
Yeah. Yeah.
We used to be a people that were just generally suspicious of our governments. And that was like kind of our, I guess, anti-monarchical, like we never wanted to be ruled over. And so theoretically we were always like, get out every 4 years. Like you have to leave. And actually we were maybe even going to ping pong back and forth between parties. And we're just not going to let anyone have too much control for too long.
Right.
But things have gotten so tribal that now we'll literally cheer our guy on through genocide and hand the baton off to the next genocidal maniac as long as the other guy doesn't get in, even though he's probably just going to do genocide in his own way as well. And it's like, it's just got to be my genocide guy.
Right.
It's got to be my like global warlord.
Right.
It's got to be my God King who can essentially do no wrong. It just can't be yours.
Well, it's because it's a sport, right?
Yeah.
I don't care how many times, Dennis Rodman kicks the cameraman. The Bulls are my team. It's the same concept, right? Like it's all a competition.
Yeah.
So
I guess the action point for us would be we could all just do to be a lot more suspicious of our government and a lot less suspicious of our neighbor. We are the ones going through this. They are the ones that are completely insulated.
Yeah.
They are weaponizing us against each other. We are not each other's enemies. Only they want us to keep doing that and thinking that because it keeps them in power.
So the hope for peace, or the hope for the world to find peace, is first found on your street and then the rest of the world.
I think there is something to be said about the idea that peace is first found in yourself and then the rest of the world. And however you come at it, whether to find peace in yourself, you go all the way overseas and then start making peace there before you ever come back home and make peace here. I don't really care. I don't care about your order of operations necessarily, about a here-ness or a there-ness or those people or our people. I think there's a lot of different ways we can get there. What I care about what seems to be the universal constant is that if you are not at peace, you'll never find peace. You'll never make peace. Like we've found over and over in this show with our guests that these experts we've been bringing on, the reason I call them experts, the reason they're worthy of teaching us, the reason they belong here is because they have learned peace in them amidst what anyone else would say the complete absence of peace externally. Yeah. And a lot of us are going about that formula in the exact opposite way. We are angsty. We are not satisfied. We want to burn everything down, and we never stop to ask, why? Like, real peace starts, you can live with the complete absence of conflict around you. It doesn't mean you have peace.
Yeah.
And you can live with complete chaos around you and call it peace. Live at peace.
So to first make peace in the world, you have to have peace in yourself.
I think so. There's this old Hebrew scripture that condemns the one who would say peace, peace when there is no peace. And I think about that warning a lot because I don't want to whitewash or paper over real pain and real suffering. I don't want to look at the world around me. I don't want to look at genocide and spin it. I don't want to call that peace when it's just imperialism and occupation and capitalism gone awry or amok. At the same time, I don't want to look at any number of external things that might seem peaceful and declare those to be peace, peace when there is no peace.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we should, I can't think of a better way to end a conversation because we've spent the last hour and a half talking about maybe the 5 biggest conflicts that are happening in the world right now, where there feels like there is no peace. If you get this far in this episode, you're probably asking yourself, how the hell do I even get involved? How do I begin to do what I can with my resources or privilege or power or finances or whatever it is, your voice, your awareness? I'm trying to get myself involved. And I think a lot of humanitarians, or maybe this isn't the right phrase, but want to be humanitarians, they're ready to go. They want to get on the front lines. And what I hear you say is, no, just wait. Take an inward look first. Number one, why is all this happening around the world? Number 2, why do I feel a call to be involved? And then maybe number 3, is there something in here that I need to find peace for before I go help that person find peace for them?
Yes, I agree.
That is a wrap on the series for How to Survive a Dictatorship. Round 1 for the Department of Peace podcast.
We are the Department of Peace. If today's conversation challenged you or changed you or made you think, don't let it stop here. If you're sick of the way things are, but you don't want to just sit in your frustration, I hope you'll become a member of the Department of Peace today. The Department of Peace online community is a space where doers and dreamers across the world are coming together to rise above the mindsets and the systems that keep us down and divided. And this isn't just talk. We're actually doing it. We fund relief work in Gaza. We're rebuilding in Iraq and Syria. And we're producing and touring protest art from Ukraine and the West Bank. When you join us, you'll be joining a community of people ready to help you wage peace in your backyard as well. And we're trying to build a real movement here, and we need you in it. Find us at www.departmentofpeace.world. Share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Because most believe the way things are is the way things have to be. But I have a feeling if you've made it this far, you're not like most. Which means we really need you. Click below to enlist in the Department of Peace today.